I firmly think that the Fed is going to allow enormous sums of money to have a significant impact on this market. And the M2 money supply is actually where it all begins. This is what we will be discussing. We will be dealing with this. So take a seat back and unwind. Everyone, welcome to Peepo Coin Channel. If you're new to the channel, you will become a subscriber by the end of this video. In a recent article, Bitwise's CIO remarked, "Great post." He quoted Bitwise's head of Alpha Strategies because once more he was echoing the Fed's recent statement that the Fed is fully prepared to assist in stabilizing the market if necessary. And we have Burr again with all of the printers here. The top official said, "Cruel men, when it comes to the Fed, our primary concern is what they will do next. The Federal Reserve would undoubtedly be ready to use its force to stabilize financial markets on the 11th, since, as we know, they did announce breaking news. There we have it. A new GT conversation will be released shortly. Susan Collins says the U.S. Central Bank is ready to take action using a variety of measures. What's crazy about this is that at the time the bond market was collapsing and everyone was basically scared of what was going on. Everyone has been attempting to claim that Trump's entire move is to get the Fed to pivot, so even now when we consider what is happening in these markets, it feels like we are going to see a significant change from the Fed, also known as a huge pivot. We'll put more emphasis on that in a moment, but first I'd like to play a video of Matt discussing the general currency war, which is essentially the trade war with the tariff discussions, on Bloomberg. Justin, a $12 billion asset manager, is here. A piece of a $12 billion asset manager. According to YCIO, Bitcoin will likely be the winner of this currency war. Bitcoin is now poised to rise sharply. We are aware that if Bitcoin rises sharply, the whole cryptocurrency market will follow suit. However, this does bring to mind March 2023, when banks were collapsing and everyone was anxious about what would happen to Bitcoin. Following that, Bitcoin actually overcame all of the negative commentary caused by those banks collapsing and, going haywire. That news really sent it into overdrive, and I really believe that this will happen here as well. With all of these tariff talks, the trade war, and the currency war, I do believe that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general are more than simply Bitcoin. Believe that cryptocurrency will triumph in a significant way, and I really believe that a huge rally is in store for this market. However, take a look at this video clip. It has, in my opinion, stood up remarkably well. I believe that the performance should serve as motivation for Bitcoin bulls and that the cryptocurrency is poised for a strong rise should the larger equity markets have a period of calm. It's important to keep in mind that the beginning of COVID was the last time we had actual economic upheaval. The price of Bitcoin dropped to $5,000 and even lower. We are discussing $80,000 today. It's a distinct resource. Its institutional ownership is distributed more widely, and once more, I believe it's telling you that the market will reach new all-time highs and then surpass them once its volatility stabilizes. It is truly a show of power, from my point of view. Because you introduced a covered call strategy at Bitwise at the beginning of April, I want to leap off the spot Bitcoin market and discuss the options market instead. How has the adoption gone, and how does this operate? Yes, we're quite happy with how these strategies have been received. Wheels Marty Toyn, with how these strategies have been received. They write covered calls on well-known cryptocurrency stocks such as Coinbase, Marathon, and MicroStrategy. The premise is that volatility is one of the characteristics that distinguishes cryptocurrency. Furthermore, how can volatility be converted into an asset? Well, you can make a lot of money by writing calls against erratic holdings. Strong trading has been observed, especially in the MicroStrategy product, which I failed to. I believe it will be well received by investors who wish to be exposed to cryptocurrency while simultaneously producing substantial yields and income over time. What function can cryptocurrencies serve in an environment where global currency volatility is increasing? I adore that query. Bitcoin, in my opinion, will emerge victorious in this monetary battle.
Correct.
I was terrified and confused as I watched, wondering what Trump would do, what China would do, and how many bilateral agreements we would sign. I think the most obvious takeaway from all of that is that we should anticipate a decline in the value of the US dollar. that a world where the US dollar serves as the only reserve currency is giving way to one that may have several. When fiat currencies decline, Bitcoin gains. Bitcoin gains. When there is more room for reserve assets, Bitcoin gains. Because it's a hedge against the devaluation of fiat money. I believe it's the most prudent financial response to the turmoil and mayhem these tariffs are causing. And I believe we're preparing for that in the US, China, Europe, and other countries. Furthermore, this is ideally positioned for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency to have a significant surge. In other words, the dollar has lost more than 30% of its purchase value in just 1 year. First, let's talk about the M2 supply. Alright, so the M2 supply is the main focus of my attention, especially based on what Raoul Pal has been demonstrating to us, which is the global M2 supply, the 12-week lead, and then Bitcoin since. Once more, this is a lagging element thus far. Imply that this graphic has looked, if you look at this chart, look at Bitcoin instead of throwing it on TradingView. This chart has been aesthetically pleasing. It appears that we are beginning to take the lead with the M2, and the general reaction of Bitcoin with the global M2 has been ideal for Bitcoin to also have a huge rise. Once more, there is a 12-week lag, but we have been beginning to make up thus far. And if we actually take a fast peek at the M2 supply right now, we could observe this and use the first few months of 2025 as a guide. Although it may not seem like much, the M2 supply has increased by roughly 0.51% since the start of 2025. We didn't even turn on the printer, and this is $111 billion. Our shift away from the Fed didn't even begin. Why would the Fed change course now? Why would the M2 supply, or the amount of money in circulation in the markets, change significantly, growing considerably? First, let us briefly examine the global financial landscape. This is the total amount of money in circulation. This includes the M2 from China, the M2 from the US, the M2 from Europe, and even the M2 from Japan. The top 5 were truly visible here. Although China has been printing for some time, it hasn't done so in the past 12 months. China has significantly increased the amount of money in the M2 supply, Furthermore, we've remained rather flat when it comes to the US, Europe, Japan, and even Germany. I have a suspicion that all of these other players, the US, the EU, Japan, even Germany, are going to respond to what China is doing and end up doing the same thing. Well, that just sounds ridiculous, you might remark. It sounds as though, you hope that this will happen. I believe this will occur because of the recent events surrounding the trade war and the tariff negotiations. In addition, we see here that the M2 money supply in China just reached a record high of 326.13 trillion. This is in yuan, and China's money supply exploded in 2016 and 2020, followed by all other nations. For precisely this reason, I believe that every other nation will do the same. Imagine how much liquidity would flood the world markets and Bitcoin when the US and Europe implement quantitative easing, or QE. What's odd about all of this is that it happened so recently, and there are a lot of subjective opinions about it. Janet Yellen spoke live on April 14th about the response to the tariffs. There is some solid evidence to support the notion that inflation will spike. Why will we, though? The reason for this is that they will begin printing more currency. Take a look at this. Jay Powell obviously dislikes these measures, and it's uncertain whether, it's not even unclear. The Fed has a variety of liquidity facilities that I would expect them to use as they did, but let me be clear that I do not currently see those in play and hope they do not come into play. That being said,